The dark night of the soul, in the technical sense from John of the Cross, refers to a process of purification and integration that the Holy Spirit is doing with certain persons on both the conscious and unconscious level. It is very painful because integration is painful. That's why we postpone doing it. That's why some people would say there's a purgatory. That's when the full integration goes. And it's painful, but you're heading in the right direction. It's caused by God's love. The dark night soul is caused by God's love, but it's touching into very, broken parts of ourselves, trying to transform them. So it can hurt, but there's a kind of hidden light being given to somebody who's in the dark night of the soul. There's some part of themselves that senses, this needs to go on. It's very hard. I need companionship. I need support to go through it. But there's something I can't name going on that if I were to turn my back on it, I wouldn't be my true self. That's the difference from spiritual desolation. Can there also be spiritual desolation present in someone while they're going through the dark night? Sure, we're complicated beings. We can have all kinds of stuff going on in different parts of ourselves. But it's really different from spiritual desolation, which is a sign of our brokenness. The dark night of the soul is a sign of God's exquisite love for people, wanting to bring them totally to God's self on both the conscious and unconscious levels. The first is that Ignatius points out that in our journey, if we're fundamentally in God's friendship and growing in that friendship, in other words, maturing Christians, the good spirit, when it acts with us, it will be like water coming into a sponge. There's a real likeness, connaturality between our direction and what the Spirit's all about. And the evil spirit relating to someone who's making wonderful progress in the spiritual life will be like water on a stone. It'll come in contrary. It won't fit in. It won't fit into the Christian's life as advancing Christian. On the other hand, if we're going from bad to worse in the spiritual life, really not caring, then the Holy Spirit will come into us like water on a rock, challenging our direction. It won't fit in neatly. It will be contrary. It will be opposed. And the evil spirit will just fit in real comfortably, encouraging us along the way if we're going from bad to worse. One other point that's really fundamental here is we're spending a lot of time right now talking about feelings. So it sounds like for Ignatius and for those who want to live in the Ignatian way, feelings are very important. But I'd like to step back and say, well, they're not the most important things. For Ignatius, if you look at his writings, what's most important are faith, hope, and love, the theological virtues, which are not feelings. Growing in faith, hope, and love is growing in our free center as graced persons in union with God. That's most important. Here I want to point out something that I think needs slight improvement in the text of St. Ignatius. His first example, or one of his examples of spiritual consolation, is every growth of faith, hope, and love. And I want to say he left out a word, every experienced increase of faith, hope, and love. Because discernment of spirits is always about what we're able to immediately notice, and then we seek to conclude what the source is. So I think he was writing a little quickly then, and I know I'll have to answer him someday for correcting his prose, but I think that's confusing. The next important level in the spiritual life, after the deepest, most important level of faith, hope, and love, are courage and energy, truth and clarity. Because everything we're doing here is about using our intelligence to notice what's going on, and then with God's grace making a choice that will help us grow in our union with God and in union with the values of God's reign. So secondly, it's being able to fight against spiritual desolation, act against it, or act with the current of authentic spiritual consolation. Those are really important. And thirdly, spiritual consolation and spiritual desolation. because they're only feelings. They're helpful or they're hindrance, but they're only feelings. So I just want to have that hierarchy there. And the last thing I want to say is that I owe a big debt of gratitude to a brother Jesuit who's now deceased, Father Jules Toner, who wrote what I think is a masterful book on Discernment of Spirits. I think it's the most complete treatment that I've seen. It's hard reading because it's so precise. I think it's precise and I think it's accurate. He uses all the writings of St. Ignatius. And he does take on other commentators, and about their positions. But I have found him very helpful. And I just want you to know that I was greatly helped by his writing in offering this presentation. One thing that it's good to notice about this whole guidelines for discernment of spirits is that spiritual consolation and spiritual desolation arise in people who care about the spiritual journey, who care about growth in authenticity, growth in friendship with God, developing their true selves, learning to love more authentically. A person who's investing in that growth will experience in analogous form, in some form, spiritual consolation, spiritual blessing, encouragement on that journey, or temptation to discouragement on that journey. And so not everybody is in a situation where these particular kinds of feelings, consolation, desolation, with the adjective spiritual added to it, would arise. It just, you need to be, paradoxically, even spiritual desolation doesn't arise unless you're invested in your own growth, but you're having a rough patch because some things are prompting in you a connection with your not yet integrated self, and it shows in spiritual desolation. But you need to be a caring, loving person who's really trying to be on track to have these feelings. I think that's an important thing to keep in mind as well.